surprisingly frank were the conversations as described by Putin. What do you think happened in there?
Do you know what? All that matters beyond the atmospherics is, do they have a plan to fix what's happening in Syria? And so far, no, they don't. Neither President Obama nor President Putin outlined in their speeches yesterday anything resembling a real plan to stop the war. Putin wants to support Assad. Really? He's got a tiny rump statelet. He's the one who's responsible for the mass murders, for the mass, fleeing of the refugees.
Right, he's been a failure, in terms of combating ISIS. So then what is Putin's play?
Well, it looks like Putin has very skillfully, some might say, simply out-leveraged the United States, which is not there, has no skin in the game, does have no cards on the table. Putin has put his military, aircraft, helicopters, armored vehicles, personnel, and came up with a surprise intelligence sharing with Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and said, here, this is our fait accompli, and you guys are wrong. You guys don't know that ISIS is what you've created. In fact, Putin, rather, Assad is the one who people are fleeing, and because he's been there, the terrorists have been unable to rise there.
Let's just show what Russia has in Syria right now, because it is interesting by comparison. 500 Russian troops, actual Russian troops, boots on the ground right there, 45 aircraft, tanks, armored personnel carriers, surface-to-air missiles, fuel tanks buried underground. Jim, the U.S. has 50 guys that they've trained. 50 guys, Syrians that they've trained, that occasionally hand the arms over to ISIS.
And 4 or 5 who actually made it to the battlefield. That's an utter failure. And you even heard Vladimir Putin poking fun, really, at that U.S. effort to train rebels during his speech yesterday. A key disagreement. They say the conversation was surprisingly frank. Of course it would be, because they have a fundamental disagreement on Assad. The U.S. says Assad, as Christian said, is the source of the problem, and Putin says Assad is the solution to the problem. So you have to wonder where the common ground is going forward. They both say that they agree that you need a political solution, but if you have that fundamental disagreement and you haven't moved any closer on that, you have to wonder how you move the ball forward.
But even a political solution, there's no notion of how to do that. They've tried that before, and Assad has simply refused. The Geneva talks, etc. I know this seems like past history now, ancient history, but they've tried it and it hasn't worked.
But is the initiative more with Putin right now than it is with Obama in the White House?
Well, let's see, because the White House seems to have changed its strategy. In other words, in public yesterday, President Obama said, I'm willing to work with anybody, Russia and Iran included. The Iran bit is a change. They didn't want to talk to Iran. They excluded Iran for a long time. And then the other bit that's a change is from Putin, Assad must go, to Assad can stay a little bit. So it's still very muddled.
Christian's right on point, too. But Putin has skin in the game now. It's got troops on the ground. And the White House response to that, it seems to be, in effect, good luck. Enjoy it. We've had our experience there, and let's see. And you hear this quietly, privately from White House officials. It's like, let's see how it goes for them.
But most unfortunately, that seems to be a trend that also happened with Ukraine, and actually they're still there in Ukraine. So it's quite dangerous to give Putin his head, so to speak, in these situations.
All right, let's move to the breaking news about what's going on in Afghanistan. The Taliban, Jim, has taken over this city. How big of a surprise is that?
It's a bit of a surprise, and it's also a real danger, because this is a Taliban stronghold area. It becomes an indictment, again, as we saw in Iraq, of the Obama administration policy of train and equip. We spent a decade there, trillions of dollars, training the Afghan security forces, and they couldn't hold this ground.
With superiority. With superiority
and airstrikes. Yeah, you had one airstrike today, but we've seen in Iraq that airstrikes alone don't gain ground back. It's been a year since ISIS has swept through Iraq. You've had hundreds of airstrikes, and Iraqi security forces haven't been able to hold back ISIS. So you need more than that if you're going to push them back from Kunduz.
Yeah, Christian, there are 9,800 U.S. troops still in Afghanistan due to leave over the next 12 to 14 months. Does that change the situation?
To be honest, I think a lot of people probably are worrying about that now, because we saw what happened when forces left Iraq. It left Iraq unable to stand its forces up, unable to defend, and then we had ISIS, and everybody said, oh, what a surprise. But, this has been going on. The Kunduz battle has been going on for pretty much a year.
People have been watching this develop. This was a slow boil there.
And just the symbolic victory of the Taliban being back.